Forward.
My name is Joseph Johnson, Mary Wollstonecraft's publisher and long-time friend, and we are here to tell you a story.
My name is Thomas Paine, and I met Mary at one of Joseph's dinners.
You will meet me a bit later, but I shall be voicing Gilbert Imlay.
And I am Olympe de Gouges, one of Mary's friends in Paris.
I will voice Mary, but you will hear from me a bit later.
Mary Wollstonecraft was born on the 27th of April 1759 in Spitalfields, England. Her father's name was Edward John, and the name of her mother, Elizabeth, of the family of Dixons of Ballyshannon in the Kingdom of Ireland. Her paternal grandfather was a respectable manufacturer in Spitalfields, and is supposed to have left to his son a property of 10,000. She had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, Edward, James, Charles, Eliza, and Everina. Of these, Edward only was older than herself. She was not the favorite either of her father or mother. Her father was a man of quick, impetuous disposition, subject to alternate fits of kindness and cruelty. In his family he was a despot, and his wife appears to have been the first and most submissive of his subjects. The unkindness or indifference from her father and family seemed to counteract the superiority of Mary's mind. From a person little considered in the family, she would eventually become its sort of director or umpire. For some reason or another, destiny did not intend for her to be a contented and unresisting subject of a despot.
The blows of her father, instead of humbling her, roused her indignation. Upon such occasions, she felt her superiority and was apt to betray marks of contempt. The quickness of her father's temper led him sometimes to threaten similar violence towards his wife. In such situations, Mary would often position herself between her father and his wife, purposefully absorbing the blows that might be aimed at her mother. She laid whole nights upon the landing-place near their chamber door, when with reason or not, she apprehended her father might break out into paroxysms of violence. The conduct he held towards the members of his family was of the same kind as that he observed towards animals. He was mostly extravagantly fond of them, but when he was displeased, and this frequently happened, and for very trivial reasons, his anger was alarming.
The rustic situation in which Mary had spent her infancy no doubt contributed to confirm the stamina of her constitution. She sported in the open air and amidst the picturesque and refreshing scenes of nature, for which she always kept the most exquisite relish. Dolls and the other amusements usually appropriated to female children she held in contempt, and felt a much greater propensity to join in the active and hardy sports of her brothers than to confine herself to those of her own sex.
In 1765, he once more changed his residence and occupied a convenient house behind the town of Barking in Essex, 8 miles from London. In 1768, Mr. Wollstonecraft again removed the family to a farm near Beverley in Yorkshire. Here the family remained for 6 years. Mr. Wollstonecraft worked as a farmer, but the restlessness of his disposition would not suffer him to content himself with the occupation in which for some years he had been engaged, and the temptation of a commercial speculation of some sort being held out to him. He removed the family to a house in Queen's Row in Hoxton near London.
One of the acquaintances Mary formed at this time was a Mr. Clare, who inhabited the next house to that which was tenanted by her father, and to whom she was probably in some degree indebted for the early cultivation of her mind. But a connection more memorable originated, about this time, between Mary and a person of her own sex, for whom she contracted a friendship so fervent as for years to have constituted the ruling passion of her mind. She was 2 years older than Mary. Her residence was at that time at Newington Butts, a village near the southern extremity of the metropolis, and the original instrument for bringing these 2 friends acquainted was Mrs. Clare, wife of the gentleman already mentioned, who was on a footing of considerable intimacy with both parties. The acquaintance of Fanny, like that of Mr. Clare, contributed to ripen the immature talents of Mary.
The name of this person was Frances Blood before. Lisbon, Portugal, 29th of November, 1785. Her breaths are becoming shallow, ma'am, said the nurse as she dabbed Francis's forehead with a cool towel. You need to fetch the doctor. Go, I will wait here. While the nurse went for the doctor, I took a moment to tidy up Francis's bedding and let in a gentle breeze from the evening. He is beautiful, Francis. She smiled and we both looked at the cot. You need to rest, my dear girl. Shall I fetch Hugh? I knelt beside her, and as I closed my eyes, I kissed her hand softly. I never wanted to let go, so I held the moment for as long as I could. Stay here a moment, won't you? She let out a small laugh and turned her body to face the cot. Rounding the corner of their small apartment walkway, I entered their living room to find Hugh Skays at the table, hands clasped together in prayer. It is a boy, Hugh. He is beautiful. Both okay? He asked. As I joined him at the table, the air in the room had turned stagnant from his sweat. Where did the nurse go off to? I took both his hands in mine as Hugh's dark green eyes searched my face for an answer I could not admit to myself. The boy is okay. He's washed and he's sleeping. Mary. I rested my forehead on our hands and took a deep breath in as a tear dripped onto the table. The doctor will come and make her comfortable. Comfortable? Asked Hugh. I pressed my forehead into our hands further and wished for someone else to take hold of my body. Hugh rested his forehead against our hands and whispered a prayer to himself. Would you like to meet him? He is so beautiful, Hugh. His eyes shot up to mine as he tried to feign a smile. Together we walked into Frances' room, her drawing sat in a pile on her desk, her clothes in a pile by the chair. Hugh had hoped the warmer air would mend her, enliven her faculties and encourage rest, but I could do nothing but watch as she faded away before my eyes. Frances? Her head turned to me. Small beads of sweat appeared at the corners of her brows, and her face had turned paler. The pungent odour of stagnant sweat and anguish filled her chamber, only lessened by the outside air. Frances coughed up more blood, each violent heave rattling her chest, and she rolled her head back to Hugh with a pained expression. My darling, everything hurts. I clutched her hand and rubbed her arm as her sweaty skin flushed between hot and cold. The doctor is on his way. I mustered a false sense of hope as Hugh's gaze wavered back and forth between Frances and me. Just you wait on now, okay? He won't be long. Don't you go anywhere, Frances. We need you. Consumption already destroyed half her body, and pregnancy only prolonged the inevitable. My friend of 10 years disappearing before me like the early morning mist dispersing across a lifeless body of water. Mary? She asked in her own gentle voice as a fit of coughing seized her. When her coughing stopped, she lay some minutes exhausted. Then she whispered, Mary, Hugh, lie down and cover yourselves with my quilt. I nestled close to her and closed my eyes. As my thoughts darted from earth to heaven, I asked myself why I remained chained to life and its misery while my friend lay dying before me. Why is it the preservation of the species, not of individuals, which appears to be the design of the deity throughout the whole of nature? Blossoms come forth only to be blighted. Fish lay their spawn and are devoured. And what portion of humanity are born to be swept prematurely away? Does not this waste of budding life emphatically assert not men but man whose preservation is so necessary to the completion of the grand plan of the universe? Children peep into existence, suffer, and die. What do we do? Hugh asked. Tears pooled at the corner of Hugh's eyes and fell across his sun-soaked cheeks as he nestled against her other side. As I turned my head to face them both, I could feel her warmth against me, and I pressed myself into her even tighter. Do you remember what you told me all those years ago at the Clares? I sobbed as I held her hand. And when I was ill, the beautiful little songs you'd sing to me. You've still those drawings to finish, Fanny, remember? Hugh and I held her hands, and I kissed them as tears pooled at my eyes and flowed down my face. She whispered, You both must be sure and not grieve. William will be without a mother, but he has you, Hugh, We all must die one day. This day is mine. She released herself from my grip and pulled my chin towards her. Promise me something, would you? Anything. Do not diminish yourself to satisfy the world. The world is vast enough to live the life you deserve, Mary. I love you better than all the world, Francis. I pressed her hand to my face as the warmth from her skin soaked into my cheeks. All the world. My chest tightened, as if a heavy weight from above pressed down on me. Her fingers trembled in my grip and my wails echoed through the room. Take me instead. Half an hour later, the doctor entered in a calm, authoritative manner and briefly attended to Francis. He muttered notations for himself, like a master adjusting a sculpture before him. After a few minutes, his mumbling stopped and he leaned in to whisper something to Hugh before departing. Tears streamed down Hugh's face as I held Francis tightly, afraid that if I let go again, she would cease to exist. Hugh motioned to the door with his head. We both kissed her hands and spoke for a short while away from her bedside. Her lungs are caving in on themselves and she'll simply stop breathing soon, said Hugh, as he looked to Francis and to their newborn baby in the cot. What am I going to do, Mary, do we tell her? Looking after him without any help is beyond my capabilities. We stepped forward and peered into the cot, their sleeping babe peacefully unaware his mother lay dying next to him. Her parents will be here soon from Ireland, but we need to be with her now. I squeezed his hand and feigned a smile. Return to her. I will inform the nurse we'll stay here through the night. I bowed my head. And Hugh? Yes, he replied. Please do not tell a dying man he'll be dead. Comfort her, she needs you, I said, and retreated to the sitting room. After arranging care of the infant and pouring ourselves 2 cups of tea, I returned to France's room to find Hugh cradling William. I paused at the doorway and tried to find a small slice of happiness in the painting before me I'd have to remember forever. We attempted to give her tea, but she would not take it, and after an hour, the nurse took William into his cot, and I returned to lie by her side and hid my face in her neck. I want to sleep, but do not leave me, either of you. I would like to have you very much near me. Hugh kissed her hand as I wiped her dampened hair from her face. I'm not leaving, Francis, I promise. Go to sleep and dream. I'll be here. Hugh kissed her hand again. I'm not leaving, Hugh caught my eye and I shook my head, bowing his head as more tears dripped from his eyes. Good night, Hugh. Mary. Good night, Francis. I kissed her hand again and closed my eyes. Throughout the evening, I waxed and waned in a delirium of sleep and restless life. I gave to misery all I had a tear. I did not know how much time had passed until the sunlight poked through a small gap in the curtains. I raised my head from her hand, my body dreary and heavy, and fixed my eyes on her chest and then to her eyes, her gaze fixed on the empty cot. Hugh lay asleep next to her, blissfully unaware she had already slipped into her eternal dream. The weight of despair rendered me motionless and I collapsed to the floor, my chest searing with pain, as Hugh's world shattered in front of my eyes. As my body swayed back and forth, Hugh awoke within a moment and shook her body with force in an attempt to wake a lifeless husk. This extinction of my friend, the violent end of what I have termed domestic love. I hope I shan't live long on this wretched earth.